The prairie was asleep beneath the moon. The stars hung heavy, sharp as glass splinters against a velvet sky, and the land breathed slow, like some giant creature at rest. Only the wind moved, drifting low across sage and sand, rattling through the dry grass like an old man's whisper. On a narrow trail, half hidden between the folds of the hills, a wagon sat as though it had been abandoned. Its wheels creaked when the night air pressed against them. Its frame swayed just faintly, as if some unseen weight had shifted inside. The horse tied to the wagon was restless. Its ears flicked. It gave a low whinny and scraped a hoof into the dust. The lantern that hung on the wagon's side swayed with the wind, but gave no flame. All was dark. All was still, until the cowboy returned. He came walking from the creek bed, where he had led his horse to drink. He was a tall figure, shoulders bent under years of silence, boots scuffed and dusted pale. In his hand, he carried the lantern, lit now, its glow spilling gold across the trail. He meant only to climb back into the wagon and sleep until dawn, but when he drew near, he saw the shape of something. No, several things curled inside the bed of his wagon. His brow tightened. He raised the lantern higher. The light fell across 5 bodies, 4 small ones, 1 larger. Children, he thought at first. Yes, 4 of them, tangled together like pups in a den, and beside them, a woman, her hair loose and matted, her dress torn at the hem, her face pale in the lantern glow, her hand clutched tight over her side, where blood had dried black against the fabric. The children stirred as the light reached them. The eldest, a boy, perhaps 12, blinked and stiffened. He dragged his little brother closer, as though to shield him. The girls clutched their mother's skirts, even in sleep. Their faces were hollow with hunger, their arms thin, but their eyes were wide and alive with fear. The cowboy stood there a long moment, lantern held high. His face gave nothing away. It was then the boy spoke. His lips trembled, his voice no stronger than a reed in the wind. "Don't kill us." The words floated out into the night like smoke, fragile and desperate. The cowboy's jaw tightened. For a long while, he said nothing. The boy's eyes searched his face, waiting for judgment, life or death. The little ones held their breath. Even the horse behind them stood silent, as though listening. Finally, the man lowered the lantern. He set it on the wagon's edge and leaned his weight against the wooden frame, staring at the huddled family. His heart had grown used to emptiness. And yet here it was, pressed upon by 5 strangers who carried their terror openly, who had made his wagon into their last refuge. He could turn them out. He could order them gone. In the West, a man was not bound to feed every lost soul he came across. Kindness often meant risk. Mercy could cost a man his life, but he did not move. The woman stirred then, waking with a gasp. Her hand flew to her children first, counting them with her touch. Only when she felt them near did she notice the stranger standing over her, lantern casting his shadow across them all. Her lips parted as if to plead, but no words came. She pressed her hand harder against her wound, as though sheer will might keep her alive a little longer. The cowboy finally spoke, his voice low and rough from disuse. "You'll bleed out if you stay there." The boy bristled. "We ain't asking for help. Just don't hurt her." The man looked at the child, then back at the woman. She could barely sit upright. Her eyes fluttered. He could see she had walked too far, carried too much. The trail had swallowed her strength. Whole, he exhaled slow, rubbed a hand across his face. 1,000 reasons to walk away, but only one reason to stay. He remembered once, long ago, dreaming of children's laughter in a home that never came to be. That dream had died with the woman he had buried on the hill. Since then, silence had been his companion, but silence tonight was broken. Without another word, he bent forward and slid his arms beneath the woman's frail body. She resisted at first, a sharp cry escaping her lips, as her wound pressed against him, but her strength was no match for his. He lifted her with ease, her children scrambling in terror. The eldest boy struck at him with tiny fists, put her down. The cowboy did not flinch. He laid her carefully onto the folded blankets at the front of the wagon. "She'll die if she stays out here," he muttered. "If you want her alive, hush your noise." The boy froze, tears bright in his eyes. The little ones clung to their mother's skirts, still trembling. The cowboy returned to the wagon bed, lifting each child down gently, setting them beside their mother. The smallest, a girl no older than 5, pressed her face into his shirt as he carried her, and he felt the fragile beat of her heart against his chest. When all were gathered, he climbed onto the driver's bench, took the reins, and clucked the horse forward. The wagon creaked, wheels groaning as it rolled into the moonlit emptiness. The prairie stretched wide, a silver sea under the stars. The children huddled against their mother, their eyes never leaving the stranger, who now carried them deeper into the night. The cowboy did not look back. He kept his gaze fixed on the horizon, where his ranch lay waiting, a lonely house, a silent barn, a patch of land that had known only his footsteps for years. He had thought it would stay that way until his last breath, but tonight, the wagon was not empty, and in the hush of the prairie, he heard the softest sound, the youngest child's whisper, half asleep, drifting into the dark. "Don't kill us." He tightened his grip on the reins. The stars burned brighter. The road stretched longer, and something in his chest, something long buried, began to stir awake. The wagon groaned as it rolled through the last stretch of prairie. Dawn was pulling itself across the horizon, a thin thread of pale gold unraveling the night. The cowboy's house came into view at last, a squat frame of timber, stooped beneath the endless sky. Behind it stood a barn, weathered gray, its doors sagging like tired shoulders. Fences sprawled outward into the grassland, where cattle shifted faintly in the morning chill. It was not much, but it was all his. He slowed, the horse guiding the wagon up the worn track that led to the porch. The wheels hit stones and rattled, waking the smallest child. She blinked, rubbed her eyes, then curled herself tighter into her mother's dress. The woman had drifted into fevered sleep, her breath shallow, her brow damp. A sheen of sweat clung to her skin, though the air was still cool. Her hand never strayed from her wound, as if she feared to let go might mean slipping away entirely. The cowboy stopped the wagon. He climbed down, boots sinking into the dust. For a long while he simply stood there, gazing at the house, his house, and then back at the fragile bundle of strangers he had carried here. He had not seen children on his land since the life he once dreamed of had withered in his hands. The eldest boy stirred, eyes sharp with suspicion. "Where are you taking us?" "Inside," the cowboy answered. His voice carried no edge, only the weight of habit. "She needs a bed." The boy shook his head. "We don't need," but the cowboy was already lifting the woman into his arms again. "Careful, steady." She groaned faintly, her head lolling against his chest. Her children swarmed around him, whispering please, half begging him not to hurt her. He did not answer. He only pushed the door open with his shoulder and stepped into the dim hush of the house. It smelled of wood smoke and dust, of years left unspoken. The table sat bare, the chairs empty. A Bible rested on the mantel, pages curled yellow. The cowboy carried the woman into the back room, where a narrow bed stood waiting with clean but unused sheets. He laid her down gently, tucking a folded quilt beneath her head. The children pressed in after him, 4 pairs of eyes following every move. "Fetch water," he said, nodding toward the basin by the door. The eldest boy hesitated, then obeyed. The others clung to their mother, whispering her name, begging her to wake. The cowboy removed his hat, setting it aside. He soaked a rag in cool water and pressed it against the woman's brow. Her skin burned beneath the cloth. He knew that Fever had seen it before on trails where wounded men never rose again. His jaw tightened. She stirred, eyelids fluttering open. For a moment, her gaze met his. Her lips parted, a whisper of sound escaping. "We'll go soon." "You won't go anywhere if you don't heal," he muttered. She tried to protest, but her strength fell away. Her eyes drifted shut once more. The boy returned with more water. He stood stiff, arms crossed. "Why are you helping us?" The cowboy wrung out the rag, laid it back on the woman's head. "Because you asked me not to kill you." The boy flinched, then looked down. His jaw trembled, though he bit it hard to still it. Outside, the prairie stretched quiet and endless. Inside, the house was no longer silent. Small feet pattered across the floor. A girl's soft sobbing filled the corners. The scrape of a chair dragged out as one child climbed up to sit near their mother. These were sounds the cowboy had not heard in years, the sounds of life breaking through the walls of solitude. He set about stoking the fire, hanging a pot for broth. His hands moved slow, practiced, though his heart was unsteady. He could feel their eyes on him, suspicious, fearful, curious all at once. Hours bled into the day. The sun climbed high, spilling heat through the windows. The children grew restless, wandering the edges of the house, touching things cautiously as though afraid they might be punished. The little boy, no more than 7, found the horse outside. His laughter rose bright when the animal nuzzled his hand. The cowboy glanced out the window at the sound, a flicker of something, perhaps surprise, perhaps memory passing through his face. By afternoon, the woman's fever worsened. She tossed weakly against the sheets, murmuring half-formed words. The children clung tighter, frightened. "Can you fix her?" the eldest boy asked, desperation breaking through his defiance. The cowboy did not answer at once. He soaked the cloth, again, pressed it to her brow. "I'll try." He had no doctor's training, only the stubborn knowledge learned from years on the range. Binding wounds, fighting off sickness when it came. He boiled water, cleaned the wound as best he could, applied strips of clean linen. She gasped, teeth gritting, but she did not cry out. Her strength ran deeper than her frail frame suggested. Through it all, he worked in silence. The children watched every motion. Slowly, the suspicion in their eyes softened into something else, not trust yet, but the beginning of it. That night, when the fever burned hottest, the cowboy stayed by her side. The children fell asleep in corners of the room, curled against one another. The lantern glowed dim, shadows dancing along the walls. He sat with the rag in hand, wiping her brow each time her breath turned ragged. His mind drifted back to another bedside, long ago, when he had watched another woman slip from life. He remembered the helplessness, the anger at heaven for stealing her away. But tonight, he would not leave this woman's side. Not again. Not another grave on his land. Near midnight, the eldest boy woke. He saw the cowboy still sitting there, steady as stone, keeping the fever at bay with patient hands. Something shifted in the boy's gaze. For the first time, he did not see it. "Stranger," he whispered, "thank you." The cowboy did not turn his head. He only nodded, eyes fixed on the fragile rise and fall of the woman's chest. The fire cracked softly. Outside, coyotes called to one another across the plain. And in that lonely house, for the first time in years, silence was broken not by emptiness, but by breath, by whispered gratitude, by the fragile sounds of life, refusing to be snuffed out. Days stretched into one another, braided by the rhythm of chores, the rise and fall of fever, the steady breath of survival. By the 4th morning, the woman's fever broke. Her skin cooled, her breaths came steadier. She opened her eyes to the light slanting through the curtain, and for the first time her gaze did not blur. The cowboy stood near the window, pulling on his boots, ready to head out to the barn. She whispered, voice raw as gravel, "You should have let me be." He turned, pausing a long moment. Then, quiet, couldn't. Her lips pressed together, caught between pride and weariness. She tried to rise, but the eldest boy held her back, urging her to rest. She frowned, not used to weakness, not used to owing her breath to a stranger's hand. Yet the house was filled now with her children's voices. The little ones discovered corners to hide in, the open porch to play upon, the fields beyond where grass brushed their legs. Their laughter, thin from hunger but stubborn, drifted like music across the land. The cowboy's house had not known music in years. She watched him from her bed as the days turned, watched the way he returned from the fields with dust clinging to his hat brim, the way he mended fences with patient hands. He never asked her for thanks. He never pried into her story. He only made space for her to heal. In return, she began to help where she could. Though her wound still pulled at her side, she rose to sweep the floor, to stir the pot simmering over the fire. One evening, she even mended his torn shirt, her hands trembling faintly as she worked the needle. When he came in from the barn and saw her bent over the fabric, he stopped in the doorway. "You didn't need to do that," he said. Her eyes flicked up to his, soft but firm. "I needed to feel useful." For a breath, silence hung. His gaze held hers a little longer than it should have. Then he gave a small nod, set his hat aside, and washed his hands. The days carried a rhythm now. The eldest boy followed the cowboy out to the barn, learning the names of tools, the way to measure grain. The younger ones fed scraps to the chickens, their giggles chasing away the stillness. The woman moved slower, but each day she gained strength. One evening, as the sun bled red across the horizon, the cowboy led the children out to the corral. He lifted the smallest girl onto a pony's back, steadying her with one hand. Her laughter rang out, pure as a bell. The other children clamored for their turns. Even the eldest, though cautious, let himself be guided by the cowboy's hand. The woman stood at the fence, one arm pressed to her healing side, watching. Her heart ached with the sight, not with pain, but with something she had not felt in years. Hope, fragile and trembling. When the youngest girl tumbled from the pony, the cowboy caught her before she hit the ground. He set her on her feet, brushing dust from her dress. She looked up at him with wide eyes and giggled. Something in the woman's chest loosened. That night, after the children fell asleep in a heap of blankets near the fire, she sat across from the cowboy at the table. The lantern's glow painted his features in soft shadow. She turned the mug in her hands before speaking. "I suppose you want to know why we were out there." His eyes lifted to hers, steady, unhurried. "Only if you want to tell it." Her throat tightened. No one had ever given her the choice. She looked down at her hands, the lines of toil etched deep. Slowly, haltingly, she spoke. Of a man she once married, harsh, weak of spirit, quick with anger, quicker to drink. Of how he turned cruel when work was thin and the children cried from hunger. Of how one night he left, muttering promises to return with wages that never came. Of how the town whispered, blaming her, casting her aside as though she had failed in keeping him. "So I walked," she said softly, eyes distant. "I thought maybe there was a place past all that. I thought maybe the Lord hadn't forgotten us yet, but I didn't reckon the trail would take everything from me before it gave anything back." Her voice broke at the end, though she tried to swallow it down. The cowboy sat still, his hands folded. He did not speak pity. He did not offer false words. He only looked at her as though he truly saw her. Not the tattered dress, not the scar of shame the town had carved into her, but the strength it took to carry 4 children through the dust with no promise of tomorrow. When he finally spoke, his voice was low, rough. "You didn't fail. You're still standing. That's more than most." Her eyes burned. She looked away, blinking fast. The room was quiet, except for the soft crackle of the fire. Between them, something unspoken settled. Not romance yet, not even comfort fully, but recognition. two souls marked by loss, finding the faint outlines of each other's scars. In the days that followed, their lives wove together more tightly. The cowboy began teaching the eldest boy how to ride, how to mend the saddle, how to watch the cattle. The boy's suspicion melted into respect. The younger children followed the woman as she baked bread, their laughter tumbling through the kitchen, but peace in the West was always fragile. One evening, a traveler passed through, stopping for water at the well. He looked at the woman long, too long, before tipping his hat to the cowboy. Later, when the stranger had gone, she sat with her hands trembling. "He'll carry word back," she whispered. The cowboy studied her. "To who? To the man who left us?" Her voice quivered. "If he knows we're alive, he'll come. He'll drag us back. He'll take the children." Fear trembled through her words, raw and sharp. The cowboy did not speak at first. He only stood, staring out across the land where shadows lengthened. Then he said quietly, "If he comes, he won't take you." The promise was not loud. It was not shouted. It was simply spoken, like stone laid into earth. That night, as the children slept, the cowboy sat by the fire again. He looked at them, 4 small bodies tangled together, breathing softly. The woman slept nearby, her face eased of pain at last dot, and in the flicker of lantern light, the cowboy made a silent vow. The house that had stood empty for so long was no longer empty. He would see to it that no hand, no shadow from the past, tore it apart again. The days turned gentler after her fever broke. The children grew stronger, their cheeks filling with the faintest blush of health. The woman moved about the house more each day, sweeping corners, tending to the fire, her wounds slowly knitting closed. The cowboy worked his fields with new eyes, for now, when he returned to the house at dusk, there was light inside, there was sound. He was not met by silence, but by the shuffle of small feet, the warm scent of bread, the echo of laughter rising thin but unyielding against the vastness of the plains. But peace is a fragile guest in the West. It never lingers. Long before the world comes knocking, it happened near the end of a week. The sun was falling, painting the sky in streaks of crimson. The cowboy was mending a gate when he saw the dust plume rising in the distance, the mark of riders. His hand stilled on the hammer. The air seemed to thicken, heavy as storm clouds. The woman came to the porch, shading her eyes. When she saw the riders, her face drained of color. She pressed a hand against her side, though the wound had nearly healed. "It's him," she whispered. The cowboy looked at her, his jaw tightening by. The time the riders reached the yard, the children had clustered around their mother, their small hands clutching her skirts. The man at the head of the group dismounted, boots striking the ground with a cruel confidence. His eyes swept the homestead, then fixed on the woman. "Well, ain't this something?" he drawled. "I leave you for a spell, and you go find yourself a new roof, new man." The woman's shoulders shook, but she held her ground. The children pressed closer, eyes wide with terror. The cowboy stepped forward. He said nothing at first. He only stood between the rider and the family, his presence solid as the barn behind him. The man sneered. "This your land?" The cowboy's voice came low, steady as stone. "It is. Then you've got something don't belong to you. That woman, those brats, they're mine." The cowboy's eyes flicked once to the woman. She was trembling, but her gaze begged him not to yield. "They're not yours," the cowboy said. The rider spat into the dust. His hand drifted near his pistol. "You think you can keep what's mine? One man standing against 3. The cowboy didn't move. His hand rested easy near his belt, but he made no reach for his gun. His voice carried the quiet finality of a grave. "This house was empty once, not anymore. If you mean to take them, you'll do it over my body." The words hung heavy in the air. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath. The children clung tighter to their mother. The eldest boy's face twisted, torn between fear and awe. He had never seen anyone stand for them before. The rider laughed, sharp and bitter. You got a death wish, old man. The cowboy's eyes did not waver. No wish, just truth. Silence cracked wide between them. A hawk cried overhead, circling. The sun slid lower, throwing long shadows across the dirt. One of the other riders shifted in his saddle, uneasy. Boss, ain't worth it, he muttered. We come for coin, not graves. The leader glared at him, then back at the cowboy. His sneer faltered beneath the man's unflinching stare. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the ragged breath of the woman behind. Finally, with a curse, the man spat again. Keep your strays, ain't worth the bullet. He swung back into his saddle, jerking the reins. The others followed, the dust swallowing them as they rode away. Only when the last echo of hooves had faded did the woman collapse to her knees, tears breaking free. The children clung around her, crying into her skirts. Relief, sharp as pain, washed through the yard. The cowboy stood still a moment longer, staring at the horizon where the dust had vanished. Then he turned, walked back to them. He bent, placing one steady hand on the woman's trembling shoulder. They're gone, he said softly. She looked up at him through tears. Her lips parted, but no words came. Instead, she reached for his hand. He let her hold it, the roughness of his palm closing gently around hers. The eldest boy wiped his eyes, then lifted his chin. He won't come back. The cowboy met his gaze. Not while I stand here. The boy swallowed hard, then nodded. For the first time, respect lit his face clear as dawn. That night, the house was quiet, but no longer in fear. The children fell, asleep near the fire, safe at last. The woman sat at the table, her hands wrapped around a mug, though the tea had long grown cold. Across from her, the cowboy sat silent, hat set aside. She looked at him a long moment, her voice trembling when it finally broke free. I don't know why you did all this, but you saved us. He shook his head faintly. I didn't save you. You were already strong enough to make it this far. All I did was open my door. Her eyes filled again, though she blinked the tears away. She reached across the table, her fingers brushing his. For a breath, they simply stayed like that, not lovers, not yet, but two souls bound by something deeper than words. Outside, the prairie breathed under the stars. Inside, the house held life, warmth, voices. A place that had once been hollow was now full. At dawn, the cowboy stood on the porch, watching the horizon blush with morning light. Behind him came the sound of children stirring, of a woman humming, softly as she stirred the fire. He closed his eyes, breathing it in. For years, he had thought the West had taken everything from him, but tonight, and every night forward, he would remember this truth. Sometimes the fiercest battles are not with bullets, but with loneliness. Sometimes the bravest act is simply to open one's door and let strangers become family. Asterisk friends, if this tale stirred your heart, remember the West was not built only on guns and cattle, but on kindness, on the rare souls who chose to protect, rather than destroy. Tell me, from where in this wide world are you listening tonight? Share your place, so we may know this fire's warmth reaches across oceans and deserts alike. And if you'd like to hear more Wild West tales whispered into the dark, don't forget to like, to comment, and to subscribe, for there are many more stories left in the dust, waiting for someone to listen.